Turn with me to Genesis, the 50th chapter. I trust you can get to Genesis quickly. And I want to start reading at the 15th verse. Genesis, the 50th chapter. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, quote, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. The scripture as it is written, and it is always our prayer that God will bless us in the reading and in the hearing of his most holy word. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord and each other. On your way to your seat, take two people by the hand and say to them, "Friend, make sense of your mess." Amen. My subject is slightly nuanced: the need to make sense out of your mess. The need to make sense out of your mess. In her 1984, I believe it is, publication entitled People Making, written by Virginia Satir, I have referenced it many times in preaching. It is, in my opinion, a seminal piece by a woman who is a Christian, also a psychologist and child development expert. And she says at a point in there to the effect that one of the things that is critical to our ability to manage the painful episodes in life is to be able to place life's pains into some constructive perspective. That it rains on the just and the unjust alike. Life exacts a pound of flesh from all of us. None of us get through this life unscathed without our own share of pain and panic, heartache, heartburn, desperation, and despair. But whether or not one gets bitter or better with time rises or falls on the degree to which we have some success at being able to put our pain in some sort of constructive perspective. Or to say in shorthand and more colloquially, to to make some sense out of our mess. Oftentimes, the angry rantings that you hear flung from the lips of people and the angry outburst that you see coming forth from the lives of people are not people who necessarily have suffered more than others, but in their sufferings, they have not had much success at putting that pain into any constructive perspective. They've made no sense out of their mess, and so they have imploded via the nonsense. Did I ever tell you about the angry older brother? I'm going to tell you. There's a story about a family that had a child, and for years it was an only child, and he liked being the only child, and all of the attention focused on him. And wouldn't you know it, mom and daddy mess up his perspective, and mama pregnant, here come another child. And they sensed that this older brother was having problems with another child on the way, and the attention that seemed to be shifting away from him, so they decided to include the older brother in even the birth of the child and brought the little boy even in the birthing room. Now, that was a bad idea, in my opinion, just to start with, because I was in the birthing room and I'm still traumatized. And as the baby burst forth from the womb, and that old country doctor grabbed him and held him up by the legs, smacked his bottom, and that newborn let out a shrill cry as he grabbed his first breath. Amen. I got another hype buddy in the church. Smacked his bottom, let out his first cry, and they cleaned off, blanketed the baby, handed him to his mother, and then the doctor turned to the older child and said, "Well, son, what do you think about your little brother?" And he said, "You ought to smack him again." And he said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Because he shouldn't have crawled in there in the first place." Sometimes you can tell people are having difficulty making sense out of the things that's unfolding in their lives. And whether or not you get better or bitter in the wake or in the midst of the painful episodes and sufferings of life depends on the success or failure that you have at putting life's pains in some constructive perspective, whether or not you recognize the urgency to make sense out of your mess. That's really sets the framework for the amazing and surprise posturing of Joseph amidst one of the great reunions of the Bible that we see unfolding in the 50th chapter here in Genesis, when he is reunited with the brothers who were the cause and the catalyst of so much pain that had befallen him over a protracted period of at least 13 years in his life. 13 years. He's a 30-year-old man reunited with his brothers who were the cause of him going through a series of painful episodes that included him being taken away from his father's house when they sold him off into slavery, doing 13 years of hard labor in trumped up charges in the dark and dank and dirty prisons of Egypt. And then now here at a 30-plus-year-old man, The circumstances of life have brought him back into reunion with his brothers, and he amazingly is gracious to his brothers. He has gotten better, not bitter with time, because he's been able to put the pains of the past into some constructive perspective. He's been able to put it into some constructive perspective. And you have to rewind the story. Joseph's story started in grandiose fashion. He is the 11th of the 12 sons of Jacob, whose name has been changed to Israel, which means God rules, but that wasn't how Israel started in life. His name was originally Jacob, which meant supplanter, trickster, hustler, Mac Daddy, road dog, player, all that. He was the streetwise dude that became church-wise after the Lord got a hold of him. He was the guy that was hustling and flowing, and the Lord got a hold of him, changed his heart, changed his name. And Jacob had 4 wives, but only one of them did he love. He had many women, but only one of them did he love. Y'all catch that? There's a whole nother sermon for a whole nother. Okay, he had 12 children, but the only woman that he loved was Rachel, who was the mother of the 2 youngest children. As a sidebar, a footnote for Women's Day sermon, having a man's baby does not guarantee you having a man's heart. But that's for Women's Day. Put a note in that, ladies. I'm going to come back to that later. And of all the women that he had, it was only Rachel that he had. He had to put in 21 years of hard labor to Rachel's father Laban, that was his uncle, to gain her hand in marriage. And in the latter years of his life, it was Rachel, the one woman that he loved, though he had been with many, that she died in childbirth to Benjamin, the last of Jacob's 12 sons. Joseph was number 11, and Benjamin was number 12. And when Rachel died, as fate would have it, he waited 20 years to have her, and then she died in childbirth. All the riddles of life. He waited 20 years to have her, and then she died in childbirth to Benjamin. And the only thing that Jacob had left of his beloved Rachel were the 2 sons that came from her. And psychologists will tell us that when those who lose a child have a tendency to cling even more slavishly to any remaining children or anything they have that reminds them of that lost thing. These 2 boys, Joseph and Benjamin, reminded him, connected him to Rachel that he lost. And Jacob, now named Israel, was conspicuously preferential toward child 11 and child 12. Asher and Dan and Gad and Issachar and Judah and Naphtali and Simeon and Reuben and Zebulun. These boys, as much his son as them, they didn't get as much lap time. They didn't get as many hugs. They didn't get the pats on the back. They didn't get the arm on the shoulder. They didn't get the pictures with dad and the selfies with him and the sons. He didn't show up at their little school events. He was preferential. The top 10 boys went beyond dad's notice, it seemed, on the day-to-day, but child 11 and 12, and particularly child 11, Joseph, caught their father's notice and became the obsessive focus of his favor that was epitomized by this lounging jacket that was called a coat of many colors. While his brothers walked around with clothes from Old Navy, Joseph's clothes came from Nordstrom. while his brothers had to tote that barge and lift that bale along with the slaves and the field hands in the course of the day, Joseph was on perpetual playtime. Not only that, but his father would dispatch him periodically to go and see if the older boys were even working hard enough. And one day he sent old Joe out to peep out what his brothers were doing, and apparently them, like brothers now, believe that snitches get stitches. And this preferential parenting paradigm over time had aroused the ire of his brothers that had crystallized into almost a homicidal rage. As they looked upon their brother and said, "Behold, this dreamer cometh. Let us now slay him, cast him in some pit, and see what shall become of his dreams." As a footnote, parents, the only thing it takes to cause division among siblings is for there to be a perception of unfairness among and within the brood. Have I got a witness? There's something native to the human spirit, some seed sown in the sinister soil of our sin nature that makes us rise up with all the fury from hell when we feel that attention is directed too much in someone else's direction. Have I got a witness? And it's not just little children, it's children who have their AARP card who still get upset. Oh, he gonna recognize her birthday. I turned 66 and he ain't said nothing about me. I'ma just keep my tithe in my pocket. Come on, somebody. And it seemed, Jerry, that even God got in on the unfairness, because while Joseph and baby boy Benjamin had the preferential treatment of their father, it seemed like even God was unfair in his endowments upon the children, because early in his life it caught the notice that Joseph had the gift of what they called the onar. It was the gift of dreams. It was the ability to peer into the future as if for you the veil between the terrestrial and the celestial, the now and the not yet, was thinned, and he could see the silhouette, the outlines of what was to come. And they knew that only God gave the gift of the onar. You couldn't concoct it. You couldn't scheme it. You couldn't take a class on it. It was a gift from God. He had the gifts from the gods, and he also had the favor of his father. And human beings, sometimes we don't scratch where we itch. Satir says sometimes our anger, that it should rightfully be directed up at God, sometimes among children up at the parent. We can't strike up where the real power is, so we strike out at those who are subject to our random outbursts. And since they couldn't strike up at God, they struck out at their brother, their misdirected anger at the father who mistreated them, and their misdirected anger at God who didn't seem to bless them the way they blessed him. And so one day out in the field, they felt that they could get rid of the boy that in their minds had scapegoated as the source of their own emotional deficits and sense of mistreatment. Let us slay him, cast him in some pit. We shall see what shall become of his dream. But somebody put a friendly amendment to the floor of life, wanted to amend the motion to kill him because they didn't want to catch a charge with God. Because according to the Jewish custom, that the very worst of all sins was blood guilt. Blood guilt was to be complicit in the death of an innocent person. And so they amended the plot to sell him to slave traders, sell him off into some foreign country, take that cotton-picking coat of many colors that we resent him having in the first place. Let's stain it with animal's blood. We can give it to our father Jacob, tell him some animal killed him, and we will have ridded ourselves with him without catching a charge with God for blood guilt, and it all will be well that ends well, no harm, no foul. It ain't what you know, it's what you can prove. That was the scheme. And you can tell they're kind of crazy because that scheme was doomed from the beginning. Any sane person will let you know that that scheme just couldn't come out right. But Satir also says that when you are under the throes of anger, you are temporarily insane. And it's insane the things that we say when we're angry. It's insane the things that we'll do, we have done when we're angry. Stop for a moment here. Hit rewind. Think of the crazy things you said when you were angry. Think of the crazy things you did when you were angry. Touch your neighbor and say, he's all in my Kool-Aid. They were angry enough to be crazy enough to think that they could sell off their brother, pass it off as he was murdered by some animal. Fool daddy, but you can't fool God. Meanwhile, Joseph was sold off into slavery. Some wandering slave catchers and Armenians took him down into Egypt. He was bought off the auction blocks by some prominent Egyptian official named Potiphar and placed in Potiphar's house. He was the housekeeper. He was, or rather, the house manager. He was his business manager. He ran all the affairs of his house because, again, I told you, Joseph was a gifted child. He was that smart child. If Joe had it, it was already done. And so it said that Potiphar had so much confidence in Joseph, he said that he only worried about the food on the plate in front of him. He didn't try to micromanage Joe. All you had to do was delegate it to Joe. It was already done. The only prohibition he put on Joe, you can have that run of the joint, just don't touch my wife. Don't put your hand on my wife. That's off limits to you. Only problem is he told that to Joe, but he didn't tell it to his wife. And we learned very quickly in the story that while she did not go to WSU, she was a cougar. Because Potiphar apparently was a man who traveled a lot. He was away from home, so he wasn't present to do his homework. You can interpret that on the way home. And because that with Potiphar being gone and no one there to scratch her itch, and the text also said that Joseph was a goodly man. That's King James shorthand for a brother who had a sense of presence, Perry. He was tall, and you can see him with his broad shoulders and his barrel chest that tightened up to a small waist. Did somebody say, come on, Jesus? Lord, help us to God. Broad shoulders, barrel-chested, plunged to a tight waist, shot back out around them big, them bulging thighs and calves and bulging biceps. He had probably high cheekbones and a slight dimple when he smiled, a firm set to his jaw, somewhere between caramel and mocha colored, and he had that kind of Sidney Poitier boyish charm and the raw good looks of Billy D. Williams and the swag of Denzel Washington. You'd have thought he came from Hilltop in Tacoma. I mean, the brother. Here she was, itching, and Potiphar not scratching, and watching this statuesque brother, all this testosterone and masculinity walking around in his raw form around her day after day after day, till she lost her stark raving mind. And one day she just told him, you gonna lay with me? And he said, no. Your husband was clear. I can have everything in the house except you. And she said, yeah, that was him, but he ain't here. And she reached for his trousers. She grabbed the trousers, but he wouldn't let her have what was in the trousers. Did you hear what I said, brother? She reached for the trousers, but he didn't let her have what was in the trousers. And he ran, but that didn't guarantee him no safety, because this was a culture in which when a Hebrew woman cried, a Jewish boy died. And on false, trumped-up charges, Perry, they threw him into the depths of a dark, dank, dirty Egyptian prison that would have made today's prisons look like an upscale resort. And there he began 13 years of hard labor in a dark, dank, dirty dungeon with the other desperate and condemned men. 13 years. 17 years old when he was ripped out of the care of his father, drug across the desert sands of Palestine, dumped into Egypt, bought from the blocks, put in a home where he then became the target of the lustings and the erotic solipsisms of this desperate middle-aged woman, who then lied and taught him that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, cast him into prison from which there normally are no probation or parole dates, thinking this is going to be the end of him, till one day, in the providence of God, the same gift that got him in trouble got him out of trouble, when the Pharaoh himself started having these reoccurring dreams about fat cows and then skinny cows, and then the skinny cows eating the fat cows. And then he started asking the native sons of Egypt, can you interpret these dreams for me? And all these native born Egyptian sons who had come through the civil service, whose fathers had worked for the civil service, none of them, who all had legacy, they couldn't interpret the dream. And then the cupbearer to the king, who had done some time with old Joe, he remembered him and he said, Pharaoh, listen, there's a cat I did some time with, or vacation as they say. I was on vacation with, and he had a strange gift of being able to predict the weather and other things before they came. I bet if you get old Joe, now he ain't native born, you know, he come from somewhere across the Rio Grande. He ain't got no papers. He's undocumented, but he got some gifts. And maybe if you call on him, you might can use his gifts. He ain't got no papers. He's undocumented, but he got some gifts. Pharaoh didn't care whether you were documented or undocumented, Egyptian, native born. He simply wanted an answer to the dream that was haunting him. They sent for old Joe, and he told him, he said, I keep having this dream. Mama, he said that there's a fat cow and a skinny cow, and then amazingly the skinny cow keep eating up the fat cow, and I need somebody to interpret it. Old Joe looked at him and said, oh, I know what that is. He said there's going to be 7 years of plenty. Stock market's going to be up. Unemployment's going down, rise in incomes, and gas prices down. He said it's going to be followed by 7 lean years. Stock market's going to crash. Unemployment's going to go up. Housing market's going to crash. And he says, so during the 7 years of plenty, store up for the 7 years of famine and blight and recession. And the king was so excited that he had interpreted the dream. He gave him a release, a pardon for the rest of his time. Not only that, he promoted him to the second most powerful man in Egypt, gave him a corner office overlooking the Puget Sound, and then on top of that, he gave him a wife, a beautiful Egyptian girl named Asenath. That meant daughter of Neith. Neith was considered to be the Egyptian goddess of beauty. In other words, he gave him the most bubbling brown sugar that they had in the Nile Valley. She was a cross between Angela Bassett and Jane Kennedy back in the day. Holly Berry, Rihanna, Janet Jackson, before she put weight on. All of them, all wrapped up in one. All the brothers in the house say, help us, God. We ought to at least be as excited about that as this sister over here was about Joseph. All wrapped up, and there he was with his new job, his corner office, his fine wife. He got money, power, prestige, and you'd want to run the credits right there and say, all's well that ends well. But sometimes when we think we've made it, God is concerned about some loose ends. God is concerned about some unfinished business in the family. God is concerned about some phone calls you haven't returned. God is concerned about some letters that you haven't responded to. God is concerned about some conversations you've been putting off. God is concerned about why you have to go in and out a certain door at the church to avoid somebody who might be closer to the other door. God is always trying to bring us back to that painful chapter in the past that we are trying to avoid. Because see, he's the God of reconciliation who forces us to revisit the stuff we've been running from for a mighty, mighty long time. And the same God who got him out of that jail and positioned him on a top perch in Egypt, through the providence of that same God, when the famine that was announced in Joseph's dream came to pass, it brought the world to Egypt seeking bread, including them 10 low-down, trifling, backstabbing brothers of his. Asher, Dan, Gad, Issachar, Naphtali, Reuben, Simeon, Zebulun, Judah. All of them. They trifling self. Here they come. Somebody say, here they come. That's how you say it when you see them. Here she come. Service started 10:30. It's 10:55. Here she come. And Joseph had to decide the decision now. You know, he's in a big position, but it should not surprise you when people in big positions still act small. Huh? The whole world is watching this reality TV show where the most powerful man in the world at the same time is the most petty man in the world. Just because you're in a big position don't mean you can't act small. And oftentimes people in big positions still act small, think small, speak small, and behave small because they haven't put their past pain into some constructive perspective. And they got bitter instead of better over time. But Joseph receives his brothers. He lays on their shoulder when he greets them and reveals himself to them. You ought to read the previous chapters. He weeps and he brings them into Egypt. He negotiates with Pharaoh to have the plush valley of Goshen to be an inheritance for them in Egypt, where they can multiply and be fruitful and multiply there in Egypt. But then Daddy dies. Daddy dies. And apparently, in the minds of the 10 brothers, apparently, all along, they had interpreted Joseph's benevolence toward them as simply a gesture of respect for their father Jacob, but not genuine concern and care for them. You see, Satir says that most of the anger that is projected at others and accusations that people fling at others is really a projection of their own thought process. In other words, people view the world through the color of their own lenses. It's a thief who thinks everybody's out to steal something. That person who's always asking you with cynicism in their voice, where you been when you got home, it's probably because of where they were before they got home. Most judgmental and crooked people and critical people in the world are the folk who are up to something, projecting onto you their own guilt about what they've done. Come on, somebody. And they're thinking because of the way they had treated Joseph, if they were in Joseph's positions, they know what they would do. So they're assuming that Joseph would do to them what they did to Joseph. That's why. You want to know why white America is so afraid of black America? Because white America remembers what they did to black America and think that if we ever get a chance, we gonna do to them what they have done to us. Racism is really a projection of your guilt. Come on, somebody. And Daddy dies. And these same brothers who at a previous time in their life were via anger insane enough to think that they could get rid of their brother and that they wouldn't suffer any consequences. Now they're frightened enough to come up with another scheme, Khadijah. They literally sit down and say, wait a minute, he's got the military, the Homeland Security, the NSA, the Attorney General's office, all at his disposal. And now Daddy's not in the way to be a buffer zone between him and us. And we know what we did. So here's what we're going to do. They sat down and they decided to try and draft a fake letter. I mean, this is Fox News worthy. They drafted a letter as if Daddy had written it before he died. And it said, Dear Joseph, This your daddy writing. Please forgive your brothers. They didn't know no better. Now forgive them for what they have done to you. They are servants of the Lord, of the God of your father. Forgive them. Signed, your daddy. And then they sent a letter to Joseph. And when Joseph got the letter, it said that when he read it, he wept. He wept. It's one of the two great scenes of weeping in Scripture. You recall the scene when Jesus stands outside the tomb of Lazarus in the book of John, where he weeps. He weeps not because Lazarus is dead, because he's died. He weeps because he sees Mary and Martha, his sisters, weeping because their faith ran out. Because they said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. They believed there was a time limit on God's possibilities. That the great I am, the one who said, I am the good shepherd, I am the bread of life, I am the way, the truth, and the life, I am the door, and I am the way, the truth, and the life. That they didn't know that one of them great sayings was that I am the resurrection and the life. And as a prelude to his own resurrection, he decided he was going to give them a foretaste by bringing forth Lazarus from the tomb. See, for God, he's never too late. He may not come when you want him or how you want him. But he always steps in right on time, because he is time, and his time is always the right time. And he can even bring life out of death. He don't even have to get there before they die. He can let them die and just bring life out of the grave. He wept because Mary and Martha's faith ran out. And he weeps when in the midst of our pain and our panic, our faith runs out. When we're in our dungeons of pain, our dungeons of financial limitation, our dungeons of emotional crisis, our dungeons of relational failure, our dungeons of lack of purpose in life, our dungeon, whatever dungeon we have found ourselves locked into in life, and believe that there may not be no release from that God can rescue us from those dungeons. And Jesus said, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus came forth because nothing is too hard for God. And he wept because their faith ran out. And he weeps when our faith runs out, in spite of all these sermons and all these songs and all these prayers and all these gatherings and all these sets of church go to meet and close. And yet in the real nitty-gritty, ugly of life, our faith still runs out. Huh? And now here we find Joseph weeping to receive this letter from his brothers, because he weeps because clearly they have come to the conclusion that his benevolence was a fake. It was a masquerade. It was a fraud. It was hiding a rage that was waiting on an opportunity for an outlet. And in their minds, they interpret that daddy's death signals an opportunity for retribution and revenge. He takes it as a negative conclusion on his own character. They thought in time he had only gotten bitter. And they didn't realize that over time he had gotten better, because he had been successful in putting his pain into some constructive perspective. How did he do that? I'm so glad you asked. See, Joseph, he says to them, when he gets the letter and he goes to his brothers, he said, wait a minute. I ain't mad at you. You didn't mean it for evil. You did do evil. As a matter of fact, it's just cold-blooded fact. You did do wrong. And there's no question about, was it really that bad? No, it was bad. You did do wrong. But here's why I'm not mad about it. Here's why 13-some years later, I'm not tripping about it. It's because I understand providence. See, you hung up on evidence, but you're not feeling providence as a matter of evidence. Yeah, you can bust somebody out for lying. You can bust somebody out for stepping out. You can bust somebody out for neglecting you. You can bust somebody out for mistreating you. And some of you are mad right now, mad as Joseph's brothers, because you still hung up on evidence. Come on, you went through the phone. You got the evidence. You seen the bill. You got the evidence. You remember all them nights, you hung up on evidence. Your attitude reflects your evidence. But in spite of the evidence, Joseph has joy that the world didn't give to him and didn't take away, because he's moved past evidence to providence. I'm trying to bless somebody in here today. We all got evidence to justify being mad, but the issue is the providence. He says, yes, you did evil. You meant it for evil. You not only hurt me, you intended to hurt me. I got the evidence, but my attitude is not reflective of my evidence. My attitude is reflective of my understanding of God's providence. You meant it for evil, but come on here, God meant it for good. You were an unsuspecting pawn on God's providential chessboard of life, where God used you and that trifling woman who lied, or that lusting woman. I use all y'all simply to push me along like strong waves in a storm-filled current, to push me to the shore that God wanted me to land on. And you unsuspectingly was simply a tool in the hand of the God of history, who had to get me from my father's house to Pharaoh's palace, where these gifts he gave me could be used for his glory and the benefit of the world. Sometimes God has to use a crooked stick to make a straight strike. I'm not worried about the evidence, because mine eyes have understood God's providence. Some of you have wisdom and strength today, in part because you had to deal with that no good stepfather, in part because you had to deal with that alcoholic mama, in part because you had to fight your way through that old neighborhood, in part because you had to deal with that professor that tried to get you to drop out of school, and you had to be twice as good to be considered as good. Sometimes yesterday's sorrows is simply your pathway to that greater glory that God has in store for you. Don't get caught up on the evidence. Yeah, you caught them red-handed, but can you see the hand of God that used them to push you and position you to be where God really wants to use you? He's put it, I've understand the providence. See, it's not only about, providence is about two things. And just it's about positioning, but it's also not only about positioning, it's about preparing. It's about positioning and preparing. Because while God positioned him to make the world a better place, he also had to prepare him so that when he got in position, he had the character to use his position for good. Because we've also seen that sometimes people can get in position, but they ain't prepared. You can get in position but not know nothing. Come on, somebody. Right now we're suffering because we are preeminent citizen. He wormed his way into position, but he's not prepared. He's not prepared to deal with domestic policy or foreign policy. He's not prepared to deal with the press. He's not prepared to try and deal with the levers of power and move a bill through Congress. He's not prepared to deal with the Supreme Court. He's not prepared to deal with the G20. He wasn't prepared to deal with Putin, who played him like a harp the other day. He's not prepared. And when you're in position but you're not prepared, you just make things worse. NATO is worse. Come on, somebody. The G20 is worse. The Paris Accord is worse. Everything he's putting his hands on, he's making it worse because he's not prepared. I heard somebody once say that your talent can make room for you, but you don't want a situation where your talent will take you where your character can't keep you. See, these 13 years was not just about positioning, it was about preparing. Because see, when you have the evidence, you can spend all your time projecting outwardly on what others did wrong, particularly when others did do a whole lot wrong. But at some point, you got to turn your concern, your gaze inward and be introspective and ask yourself, how have I contributed to this melodrama? What did I do to arouse the ire of my brothers? Yeah, or maybe if I didn't do anything directly, can I at least see the dynamics? Can I understand my brothers better? Well, how would I have felt if I had to work all day long and I'm out there in a loincloth with no shirt on, with sweat coming down my brow, and daddy don't send me a glass of water, but there's another child out here who's in perpetual playtime. I'm shopping from Old Navy. He's getting his stuff from Nordstrom, and on top of that, here the fool come gonna snitch and tell daddy that we out here taking a break when we supposed to be working. Maybe I would have been mad too. Maybe at some point we have to stop projecting our anger outward and turn at least a little bit of time to look at us and see that it's not my brother nor my father, but it's me, oh Lord. Brothers, for a moment, can you imagine 17-year-old Joseph snatched from the bosom of his father's care, drug across the Palestinian sands in chains, put up on a block where your body and your teeth and everything's examined, sold to someone like in complete objectification, put in his house. Now you become the bullseye of some frustrated woman who then lies on you when she got your trousers but couldn't get what was in them, and now you doing hard time in a dark, dank, dirty dungeon in Egypt, and with no thought of ever being paroled. You got to know that brother was angry. You got to know that he spent years in the first part of his sentence thinking, how could my brothers have done this to me? Why couldn't my daddy have done anything to spare me? And how could they put me on that block like that? How come that woman lied on me? I was too good for Potiphar to take her word over mine. He should have known I was innocent. Can you imagine the rage that must have gone through that brother's mind? But somewhere in those 13 years, he stopped worrying about evidence. Somewhere he stopped fuming about what others had done to him. Somewhere in those years he began to turn his sense elsewhere and believe that maybe, just maybe, God is up to something with it. Maybe this all is going to not be for naught. Maybe God is doing something dynamic with me, in me. We've got to walk by faith. Oh God, I feel like preaching this morning, and not by sight. I was reading one of the biographies on Nelson Mandela, and it says that when in the early years when he was in Robben Island, he was like the rest of them. He was mad as the opposite of heaven. And his only concern was letting the guards know, you can kill me at any time, but you ain't going to take my dignity. You ain't going to break me. He said, but even that was fueled by rage. He says, but as time went along, he said, there's a point at which he says that he realized that the South African government at any time could kill him. They could determine when and how he died. But they could not determine his spirit. That was up to him, whether or not he would die bitter or whether he would die with peace and love toward all people. And he said he determined he would not die with the hatred toward his captors that his captors had learned to have toward him. That was well within his control. Even when our bodies are chained, don't think that there's not a part of life that is within your control. Even within your political dungeon, in your financial dungeon, if you've got a birth defect and you're in a physical dungeon, there's a part of life that remains very much under your control. It's within your decision processing as a free moral agent. You get to decide if you're filled with love or hate. You get to decide if you're going to have joy or sorrow. You get to decide if you're going to think positive or negative. You get to decide if you're going to let the light of God into your consciousness or wallow into the darkness of self-pity and why me. That's up to you. And Nelson Mandela, who never expected to be released, simply made a decision that when I die, I will die with love toward all people. Somewhere in Joseph's 13 years, he turned from his anger over the evidence he had on others toward it, became more introspective and decided to trust God. This is why the Proverbs writer said, trust in the Lord with all thy heart. Lean not to thine own understandings. In all thy ways acknowledge him,
and he shall direct the path. See, the beauty of what we have here is that at this point in life, freed from Egypt, years after he has been released, now with a good job, good wife, power and position and prominence, he's retrospectively looking back over it. But while he was in the dungeon, somewhere along the line, he had to decide before the outcome was clear, with the conclusion that it may never get better, that he would be better, even if things didn't get better. Oh, see, that's my sermon right there. You got to decide if you're going to be better, even if things don't ever get better. See, that's the power of the Spirit. That's what Jesus meant when he said, I have overcome the world. Rejoice. In this life you shall have tribulations, but rejoice and be exceedingly glad, because I've already overcome the world. Overcoming the world didn't mean escaping the world and sailing around its troubled waters. It meant I took everything life threw at me. I took the nails in my hands. I took the spikes in my feet. I took the spear in the side. I took the punches in the gut. I took the slaps on the face. I took the ugly name calling. I took the rumors and the lies and the backbite. I took it all, and I still said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. I had the evidence, but I knew the providence was if they kill me on Friday, I'm getting up on Sunday morning so that all the world might be free. And if God uses you to position me, and if God uses you to improve me, thanks be to God. That's why Paul said, I glory in tribulations, because it's in tribulations where we get deeper and better and stronger and wiser. Listen, I used to hear him say, if I never had a problem, I wouldn't know that God could solve them. Come on, slap your neighbor a high five and say, if you are my enemy, come on, repeat after me. Say, if you are my enemy, you ain't nothing but sandpaper that God is using to make me smoother. Come on, look at somebody else and say, listen, even if you are a fool, God, that you are the fool that God put in my life to make me pray more, to make me trust more, to make me get closer to God. Because life is filled with swift transitions, not on earth. Unmoved can't stand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold on to God's unchanging hand. God positioned him. God prepared him through all the heartache. And my brothers and sisters, you have to choose whether or not you're going to trust him while you're in the dungeon. Somebody here today is in a dungeon. It's a physical dungeon. You wonder why you got the problems that you have. Reverend Braxton said it best on Thursday. You trying to get out, and you don't realize that the lesson is where you're at. It's a school of hard knocks where we learn the lessons that make us useful to God. We want to get out, but don't be so worried about getting out that you don't learn the lesson while you're in, so that when you get out, when Joseph got out, he was better and not bitter. When you get out of this medical problem, make sure that you're better and not bitter. When you get through this breakup, make sure that you're better and not bitter. When you get through this problem, make sure that you're better and not bitter. If you got to go through it, don't be concerned about the evidence. Get to the providence and see where God has taken you. Come on, somebody. Slap your neighbor another high five and say, I'm going to just trust God for this mess. I know he's up to something. Just say, I'm going to just trust God for this mess. And if you really going to trust God, don't fool me now. If you done made up your mind right here and right now, if I done preached enough to you where you just gonna try God and just trust him for this message, you can start shouting right now. If you gonna trust God for this message, you can wave your hand right now. If you just gonna trust God for this message, you can open your mouth and give him a sacrifice. Just say, I'm gonna trust God for this message. Say, Lord, I trust you.